It's just maybe they don't like their uncle more than they don't like each other. And so they're all scheming against each other, and they try to unify against him. But again, he basically can take the rest of Egypt, and the only thing that he can never take is Alexandria. And it's typically because the Romans are able to prop up and not allow him to get fully control of Egypt. And I think I've mentioned this. The reason the Romans don't want Egypt to fall is this is one of their main supply lines for grain. And so they want to keep control of that and not let another power be the one that's controlling that area. Okay. All right. Here in 26 and 27, his armies shall be swept away, many shall fall down slain. Both these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil. I think talking about the brothers again. And so, if you remember, Antiochus had captured Ptolemy VI, his nephew, and kind of was holding him, but going to use him to put him back on the throne and use him as a puppet. But obviously they're at odds. And then the two brothers are also plotting really against each other. And so what it comes out, you can't trust anyone, not even in your own family. And so these things are just taking place, again, with that sphere of the Romans kind of really, in a sense, controlling all the players, the actors in this episode here. Okay? All right. Then we get to, while returning to his land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant. So he shall do damage and return to his own land. So this gets a little confusing in here because he actually makes several invasions of Egypt, and he's going to return a few times. But for two times we know that he is going to directly have an impact on Jerusalem. One of the times, the first time, he's going to come back, and he is, remember, he's kind of placed who he wants to as the high priest, and typically he's going to take some kind of a payment or something and just make sure to see how things are going. The last time he comes, we'll get to that, he is going to be furious because the Jews have thought him to be dead, and so they have initiated kind of a reform, very brief, and then he's going to take his vengeance out on that. But it seems this period here, maybe around 169, again, we've talked about this. Jason had been had been paying to be the high priest, but somewhere in this period of time, his assistant Menelaus, who is a Benjamite, decides to pay off Antiochus even more. And so Antiochus says, sure, I'll let you be the high priest. And so this drives a greater divide among those that are trying to adhere to what God says, which obviously the priesthood doesn't go through the line of Benjamin. And Jason, who is, obviously he's the line of Levi, but he's a Hellenist, and they don't really like him. So they've got, who are you going to pick, bad or worse? And so this obviously drives them even more incensed against Antiochus. Okay, and so it's at this time it seems that Menelaus allows him to take things from the temple. Now, remember that was attempted before. It wasn't successful. It seems like it was successful on this time through. And then he's going to come back again to Egypt at some point. Okay? And so he shall return and go to the south. For ships from Cyprus shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved. And here we go. And return in rage against the holy covenant. So if you notice, we've had that mentioned. We'll go back here. In 28 and moving forward, the holy covenant, talking about, I think, the temple area and just the center of the worship for the Jews and all. And again, talking about that. So here in 29 and 30, this time he is returning in rage, not just going to plunder. Okay? And so at that time, when he basically thinks he's got them this time, and that's where I said the Roman representative comes and says, You might need to think about that. And I just put it here. Antiochus agreed. He didn't have any choice. And so he had to do what the Romans said. He's upset about that. And he's also upset because he finds out that Jason has led a revolt to oust his high priest, the man that he thinks he rightfully can put on in this position, really as a leader of the city. So Menelaus has been driven out of the city. Jason's in control. Antiochus Epiphanes returns, okay? And at this point, he is furious with the Jews for doing this. And this is going to bring the terrible suffering. They've already been under a lot of strain, but now he's going to unleash a lot of violence against the Jewish people. And so it talks about here, they shall defile the sanctuary fortress, then they shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. And we've mentioned this before. Again, if we look back to the previous visions and references back in Daniel chapter 8, it would seem that we're talking about the same person all along here, Antiochus Epiphanes. And so at this point, he desecrates the temple. He says, you're not going to do anything. We're going to shut off everything that you've ever done. You're not going to get to do anything anymore. It's done. He puts up a statue of Zeus in the temple, and supposedly it was in the face of Antiochus IV. So you can look at me every time you come in because I'm like a god anyways. And in addition, we're going to read some references here from the Maccabees. There's reference to up to 80,000 people possibly killed. Sometimes you read, I think their version says 40,000 taken into slavery. But nonetheless, he's going to exact a terrible toll on the people. Oops, go back here. The people of God. And so with that being said, I want to read from the scripture here, and then before I read from the book of Maccabees, I'll see if there's any comments or questions here before we get into this last part here. So let's pick up in verse 32. 32 through 35, it seems, is possibly the end of us talking about this king. And then we get into, some people think maybe it continues after that. Some people say it's fast forwarding to the Romans. And so we're going to at least stop here because this is where we want to kind of look at the interaction when he comes into Jerusalem and inflicts this terrible persecution upon the people. And this is where we bring in for our next lesson the rise of the Maccabees. Okay, so let's read here, verse 32 through 35. Those who do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt with flattery. We've seen that, him doing that a lot. But the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. Just keep that little segment there. People who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. And those of the people who understand shall instruct many, yet for many days they shall fall by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. And when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join with them by intrigue, and some of those of understanding shall fall to refine them, purify them, and make them white until the end of time, because it is still appointed, still for the appointed time. And so obviously a lot in there and all, but I wanted to read, kind of overlay that with, again, from First Maccabees. So again, remember, for those that may not, this obviously is not a book of the Bible. It is what they call Apocrypha. It's written during the period of time by this group. And the first book of Maccabees, for the most part, is historical narrative. Some of the stuff we're reading about and what we're about to start to see happen with the family of Mattathias. And then the second book, which I'm going to read an excerpt from that about this period of time as well, seems to be kind of the same thing with an overlay of more of the religious thought process. And so hope that this maybe be helpful to us reading from this, okay? So this is from chapter 1 of that, and I'm going to pick up here in verse 10 and read a few verses and then drop down and read where we pick up here, I think, from Daniel chapter 11. So in verse 10 of First Maccabees, there sprang from these, that is, these rulers of the north, a sinful offshoot, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus, once a hostage at Rome. He became king in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Again, remember, numbering it different than what we've seen in the regular narrative. In those days there appeared in Israel transgressors of the law who seduced many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the Gentiles all around us. Since we separated from them, many evils have come upon us." That is important right there, because we've talked about that a lot. This hastens back to really what we saw in Ezra and Nehemiah and what Malachi had said, and that is many, many times a large number of the Jews that have come back from the return, their go-to thing is, God has deserted us. Therefore, and in the past it would have been, let's run after many gods. In this case is, let's do what the Greeks are doing, because it'll serve us better than what we've done in the past, because God's not going to help us. He's not listening to us. And so they make this excuse that that's what's happening. The proposal was agreeable. Some from among the people promptly went to the king, and he authorized them to introduce the ordinances of the Gentiles. Thereupon they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the Gentile custom. And if you haven't read about that, that would mean basically in their gymnasiums no one's clothed, and they obviously commit all kinds of things with connection to that. And that was connected to Jason. He actually approved that and had that gymnasium built, from what we read from all the different sources. So the high priest, supposedly the high priest of God, allowed a gymnasium built in the Greek style and custom. And that was what took place. They also disguised their circumcision, abandoned the Holy Covenant. They allied themselves with the Gentiles and sold themselves to wrongdoing. And then I'm going to drop down toward the end of the chapter and pick up kind of where we're at here, I think. This is verse 41 of that first chapter. Then the king, that is Antiochus Epiphanes, wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. And this is where he declares, I'm done with it. You're not going to get to practice and do anything dealing with Judaism anymore. It's done. It's forbidden. It's outlawed. And it's punishable basically by death. And abandoned their particular customs. All the Gentiles conformed to the command of the king, and many Israelites delighted in his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. The king sent letters by messenger to Jerusalem and to the cities of Judah, ordering them to follow customs foreign to their land, to prohibit burnt offerings, sacrifices, and libations in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbath and the feast days, to desecrate the sanctuary and the sacred ministers, to build pagan altars, which we're going to get to on Wednesday night, and temples and shrines, and to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, to leave their sons uncircumcised, and to defile themselves with every kind of impurity and abomination, so that they might forget the law and change all of its ordinances. Whoever refused to act according to the command of the king was to be put to death. In words such as these he wrote to his whole kingdom. And he appointed inspectors over the people, and he ordered the cities of Judah to offer sacrifices, each city in turn. Many of the people, those who abandoned the law, joined them and committed evil in the land and drove Israel into hiding. On the 15th day of the month Kislev, in year 145, the king erected the desolating abomination upon the altar of burnt offerings, and in the surrounding cities of Judah they built pagan altars. And any scrolls of the law that they found, they tore up and burned. And whoever was found with a scroll of the covenant, and whoever observed the law, was condemned to death by royal decree. And it goes on and it talks about some of the atrocities committed to even women and children. And it says at the very end then, but many in Israel were determined and resolved in their hearts not to eat anything unclean. They preferred to die rather than to be defiled with food or profane the holy covenant, and they did. And very great wrath came upon Israel. And so that's our overlay with the vision that Daniel saw and with the historical narrative of this one Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And then finally here, let me read, I think I've got an excerpt from 2 Maccabees. This is very short here. And this is after he hears that Jason has gone back into Jerusalem. When these happenings were reported to the king, he thought that Judea was in revolt. Raging like a wild animal, he set out from Egypt and took Jerusalem by storm. He ordered his soldiers to cut down without mercy those whom they met and to slay those who took refuge in their houses. There was a massacre of young and old, a killing of women and children, a slaughter of virgins and infants. In the space of 3 days, 80,000 were lost, 40,000 meeting a violent death, and the same number being sold into slavery. And that is the man Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And so we'll come back Wednesday night and we'll see the group that decides to stand up to that, what happens, and that'll bring in our time of the Maccabees as we move forward. We've got a couple of minutes here. Any comments or questions that we can, maybe a question we can think about till Wednesday and all. Tony?
Just one, several comments, but one to make that it's amazing if you read Daniel 11 how much detail there is. This king did this while this was going on,
right.
And so many people are mentioned, so many activities are mentioned, and this is before the fact, before it happened. And so, as you said, I mean, some of the things are maybe difficult to line up, but this is prophecy, this is God.
Sure.
I read somewhere that this is the most detailed prophecy in the Bible.
For the length it is, I think so, yeah, exactly. All right, anyone else? Give.
That Daniel uses the name of the country of Greece before it is even a known word.
Right. And before they're on the rise or anything, that's exactly right. I think someone mentioned that to me outside of class another time.
The abomination of desolation is spoken of several times, and Jesus mentions that future.
Right.
He says, "This when you see the abomination of desolation,
Right.
standing where it ought not." That means whenever you see the word abomination of desolation, just think of the temple.
Right. And something terrible is happening, obviously, and so it's happening here. And so we'll pick up with that very thought of that in the temple, and then out in the countryside, and that's where we're going to pick up with Mattathias and his sons on Wednesday evening, Lord willing. Thank y'all.